The early summer of June 1967 in Easton, Bristol, opened like many others, warm, quiet, with the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bird call. 75-year-old Louisa Jane Dunne, widow, mother of two, lived alone in a modest house on 58 Britannia Road, a terraced street lined with small front gardens, neat hedges, morning newspaper deliveries. For decades, Louisa had been part of the community, first married to Edwin Teddy Parker, a city councillor, then later to John Dunne. But by 1967, she had become reclusive, keeping more to herself, perhaps haunted by loss, perhaps simply wanting peace. On 28 June 1967, her neighbor, concerned by Louisa's absence and silence, approached her home. No answer. Doors locked, windows drawn. Something was wrong. The neighbor entered or saw through a window. Louisa was found dead in her front room, lying among piles of old clothes. She was not sleeping, was not ill in bed. She was dead. She had been raped and strangled, as the post-mortem would show, dying of strangulation and asphyxiation. Days later, forensic examiners recorded her injuries: abrasions, signs of force, pressure on her mouth, evidence of a hand pressed over it. Neighbors in the area had reported muffled screams and cries in those nights between 26 and 28 June, but no one knew exactly when the crime was committed. The house bore little evidence of a violent struggle. Louisa, vulnerable, alone, presumably taken by surprise. From the moment the body was discovered, investigators sensed they had a serious, brutal crime on their hands. They worked through 1967 collecting what evidence they could: swabs from Louisa's body, her clothing, notably a blue skirt, and physical traces from the house. One particularly important piece was a left-hand palm print found on a rear upstairs window, believed to be the point of entry. It was thought that the killer forced that window, or used it to get in. Investigators gathered palm prints from thousands of men and boys in the area. Around 19,000 hands tested. They carried out a house-to-house campaign, statements, scouring for leads. Yet, no match was found. A key issue: the window print didn't match any of the prints in the ring of homes from which men were asked to supply palm or hand prints. Ryland Headley, then 34, lived with his wife in Picton Street, Bristol, roughly a mile and a half from Louisa's home, but crucially just outside the geographic area in which palm or handprints were being collected. Thus, his palm print was never taken in Bristol in 1967. For decades, that print remained unmatched, evidence archived, hopes for identification growing dim. Despite the failings of forensic science at the time, police preserved what they could: the swabs, the skirt, Louisa's clothing, cigarette ends, mortar from garden walls, everything packed into crates, boxed, labeled, stored. Over the years, detectives occasionally opened the files, reviewed the case, looked for new leads, but nothing dogged enough surfaced. No DNA technology yet. Fingerprint databases were limited. No match to the palm print. Louisa's daughters, Edna and Iris, grieved, aged, lived with the mystery of who killed their mother. The community spoke in hushed tones. Easton remained the same-ish, changing as the decades passed. Politics, city life, life's normal rhythms carried on. Fast forward to October 1907, Ipswich, far from Bristol, housed a man whose actions would mark him for crimes that echo Louisa's story. Brother to many veterans of crime reporters, Robert journalists, this took place in the later 1970s, when Ryland Headley, now living in Ipswich after moving from London, began committing overnight burglaries, then escalated to violent sexual assaults. In October 1977, two elderly women, one aged 84, the other 79, were raped in their homes after intruders broke in. Headley admitted those offenses. He threatened violence, forced entry, used aggression in an attempt to prevent resistance or cries for help. Among the victims, the 84-year-old was threatened with strangulation. The 79-year-old told that if she made a sound, he would kill her, or smother her, or use a pillow as weapon. These were not impulsive burglaries gone badly wrong. These were predatory, terrifying, deeply personal invasions. Police investigating those assaults found fingerprints at one of the scenes. They launched a mass house-to-house and fingerprinting operation in Ipswich. On 3 December 1977, Headley's fingerprints were taken. 9 days later, on 12 December, he was arrested in London. He was charged, convicted of the 2 rapes, and also admitted to 10 burglaries carried out roughly between 1973 and 1978. Initially, the sentence was life imprisonment, but on appeal, after a doctor's testimony that Headley's behavior was driven by sexual frustration in his marriage to an ambitious and demanding wife, the sentence was reduced to 7 years. Headley served about 2 years before being released. This chapter deepened the pattern. Elderly women broken into homes, threatened, assaulted, a pattern ignored or missed in Bristol 30 years earlier. As Headley walked free from the 1977 convictions, life carried on. In future decades, forensic technology evolved. Fingerprint databases expanded. DNA profiling became standard. Cold case units formed. Forensic laboratories learned new methods of recovering old and degraded material. But until very recently, the Louisa Dunne case was a relic. Preserved evidence, but no match. Just the palm print, the skirt. The clothing, stored in crates at Avon, Somerset Police Headquarters. By the 2000s, some investigators took note. In 2009 and again in 2013 to 14, parts of the case were reviewed. Still, no useful match from the palm print. No viable suspect identified. The cold case unit kept the evidence sealed. The blue skirt, the semen stains, Louisa's clothing, all remained preserved with care. Then came 2023. Avon Somerset Police, as part of their major crime review team, reviewed unsolved murders including Louisa's. They asked, can modern forensic science do what was impossible in 1967? Items were identified for new testing. Among them, the blue skirt worn by Louisa, preserved for nearly 6 decades. Swabs and clothing stored and sealed. In May 2024, the skirt was sent for DNA testing. A forensic scientist, Andrew Perry, found a large quantity of semen on the back of the skirt and traces on the hair. The analysis, using modern DNA profiling, revealed a match, a full-day profile matching that of Ryland Headley. The match ratio quoted in court was huge, 1 billion times more likely to belong to Headley than someone else. Crucially, Headley's DNA had been on the National Day database since 2012 from an unrelated offense. That meant when new day evidence was extracted from the skirt, a comparison was possible. Meanwhile, the old palm print from the window was also retested. Fingerprint experts compared it with Headley's palm print, newly taken after his arrest. Expert Elizabeth Hobbs identified over 25 shared characteristics between the 1967 window print and the print newly taken. This matched print was a left-hand palm, a distinctive set of ridge details, a match that verification experts confirmed. Some discussion and blind verification followed. Also, electoral roll and address records placed Adley and his wife in Picton Street, Bristol, about 1.5 miles from Louisa's home in 1967. Though that address was outside the zone from which palm prints were solicited in 1967, it showed proximity. On 19 November 2024, after forensic results were in, Headley was arrested at his home in Ipswich by officers from the Major Crime Review Team. He was charged that same day with the murder and rape of Louisa Dunne.
Now some breaking news from the UK. A 92-year-old man has been found guilty at Bristol Crown Court of the rape and murder of 75-year-old Louisa Dunne back in 1967, in what is thought to be the UK's longest-running cold case ever to be solved. Ryland Headley was convicted at Bristol Crown Court of killing the 75-year-old mother of 2. Sky's West of England correspondent Dan Whitehead has this report.
A victim born more than 133 years ago, her killer only now behind bars. Louisa Dunne was 75 years old when she was raped and murdered in her own home in Bristol. It was the latest DNA testing that finally found the man responsible.
This is about your grandmother. And I said, have they caught him? This came out, I never thought I'd say anything like that. Have you caught him? And she said, we have a suspect.
June the 28th, 1967. Louisa Dunne's neighbours noticed she wasn't stood on her doorstep that morning, watching the world go by as she normally would. Instead, they discovered her dead inside her house, bruised, bleeding from one ear, her underwear around her ankles. At the time of the original investigation, police found a palm print on the rear window of Louisa Dunne's house. They took around 19,000 prints from local men and boys, but the man who was responsible, a Ryland Headley, lived just outside the ring of selected homes, so wasn't found. Traces of semen were discovered on Louisa's clothes, but this was 20 years before DNA testing. All the evidence was stored in Police HQ for nearly 6 decades, but in 2024 it was re-examined. New tests found a DNA match. Police were told it was 1 billion times more likely to belong to Ryland Headley than anyone else.
I had to read that email a number of times to actually fully digest the content of it and believe what I was reading. And then it was okay, game on, let's get this investigation going.
And I'm here today because I'm arresting you on suspicion of the rape and murder of Louisa Dunne.
Ryland Headley was arrested at his home in Suffolk, now 92 years old. He said nothing in police interviews.
No comment.
And didn't give evidence in the trial. As well as the DNA link, officers matched his palm to the print taken in 1967. His conviction brings relief to Mary, who has lived with what happened to her grandmother for most of her life.
I think it's appalling. The poor woman. It must have been absolutely terrifying. And the reality of a rape, I don't like thinking about. I don't think anybody does.
I think this investigation shows that you should never give up. Yes, it's from 1967, but actually, at the time, we reinstigated it in 2024. That was 57 years ago. There was a chance that a suspect could still be alive, and as it turned out, he was.
This is thought to be the longest cold case from crime to trial in the UK, one that's finally brought justice more than half a century on.
He first appeared via video at Bristol Magistrates Court, then transferred to Bristol Crown Court, where the trial was scheduled for June 2025. The trial opened on 16 June 2025. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was solemn. Prosecutors laid out their case. The DNA evidence, the palm print evidence, neighbor statements from 1967, the autopsy findings, Louisa's blue skirt. They called witness after witness, including the pathologists and experts who had reviewed the case after so many years. The prosecution emphasized how the preserved evidence, combined with modern testing, brought clarity. They spoke of the DNA match being 1 billion to 1 in favor of Headley. They showed how the palm print matched in over 24 characteristics. They read out statements from neighbors who heard screams in the night, who noticed unusual sounds. They explained that Louisa had died from asphyxia, from strangulation, including pressure over her mouth. The defense tried to cast doubt on the state of the old evidence. Was the skirt properly sealed all those years? Could contamination have occurred? Could other people have come into contact with the items? But the chain of custody, the careful archiving, the repeated reviews, and the double expertise in fingerprint matching all worked against them. During the trial, the prosecution brought in the earlier rapes as part of establishing pattern of behavior. They recounted to the jury how, in 1907, Headley broke into the homes of elderly women, threatened them with violence, used coercion. They described how the 79-year-old victim was told he had a gun, that if she screamed or made no yar, there would be worse consequences, and how the 84-year-old was threatened with strangulation. Fingerprints from one of those crime scenes had led to a house-to-house fingerprint operation, culminating in Headley's arrest on 12th of December, 1907. He admitted those rapes and the series of burglaries. He was convicted, originally sentenced to life, but on appeal the sentence was cut to 7 years. After serving about 2 years, he was released. The judge in the 2025 trial, Justice Derek Sweeting, highlighted these earlier convictions not merely as background, but as part of the tapestry of evidence showing a pattern, breaking into homes, targeting elderly women, using threats, violence, rape. The argument made was that Louisa's case, horrific as it was, fit the same profile, suggesting Headley may have believed himself long safe, because no one had yet connected the dots. On 30 June 2025, after exhaustive proceedings, the jury returned a verdict, guilty on both counts of rape and murder, for the 1967 death of Louisa Jane Dunne. Justice Derek Sweeting the next day passed sentence: life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years. But at 92 years old, the judge made it clear that Headley would never be released, that for all practical purposes he would die in prison. The judge, in his sentencing remarks, called Headley cruel and depraved, pitiless. He said he showed complete disregard for Louisa's dignity, that she must have suffered substantial fear and pain, that her death was horrifying, and crucially that Headley had shown no remorse or shame.
Ryland Headley, you've been found guilty by the jury of the murder of Louisa Dunne and of her rape. For the murder of Louisa Jane Dunne, the sentence must be one of life imprisonment. Having considered all the aggravating features of this case, including the impact on Louisa Dunne's family, who have waited decades for justice, the minimum term I impose is 20 years. You will be entitled to credit for the time spent on remand, which can be calculated separately. It is normally necessary to explain the effect of such a minimum term in detail, but given your age, and for all practical purposes, I can do so in very short terms. You will never be released. You will die in prison. You can go down.
He told the court that the earlier unsolved state of the crime, the lapse of time, compounded the suffering of Louisa's family, her daughters Edna and Iris, her grandchildren Mary and Nigel, the extended family, all haunted by decades of not knowing. Detailing the forensic backbone of the case, the palm print found on the upstairs rear window in Louisa's house was the first physical lead. Despite comparing that print in 1967 to thousands of men and boys in the area, no match was found. Headley's handprints had not been taken in Bristol at the time. The blue skirt, preserved for decades, held biological material. In 23-24, advanced DNA extraction methods, microelution, sensitive profiling, allowed forensic scientists to pull a full DNA profile from semen stains and traces, with the statistical strength to say the DNA was 1 billion times more likely to be Headley's than anyone else's. When Headley was arrested in 24, his palm print was taken. Experts Elizabeth Hobbs and others compared it in blind verification to the 1967 print. Over 25 matching ridge characteristics between the two were identified. Another expert initially had no knowledge of who the print was thought to belong to. Verification was part of ensuring no bias. Address and electoral records placed Headley at Picton Street in 1967, within reasonable proximity. Although it was outside the print collection ring, it showed he was geographically close. The 1977 offenses also involved fingerprints left at scenes. The operation to collect prints, matching them to Headley, helped convict him then, and those earlier convictions reinforced pattern evidence later. The conviction of Headley in 25 marks more than just a legal victory. It stands as the longest time between crime and conviction in the UK for a murder case, 58 years. It is believed to be the oldest solved cold case in modern British history. Louisa's case, once thought unbreakable, was cracked by a combination of steadfast evidence preservation, advances in forensic science, and dogged investigative work by police and Crown prosecutors. For the Dunne family, justice arrived, albeit late. For Edna and Iris, for Mary Dainton, for generations who grew up with the mystery and the grief, there is closure, though nothing can erase the pain. The sexual violence, the violation, the loss. The earlier rapes of 1907 and the burglaries from the 1970s now sit in the record as far more than past crimes. They are warnings unheeded, clues not recognized soon enough. They reflect the ways the justice system, forensic tools, and public expectation have changed. What was possible then was limited. What is possible now is more. Finally, the case underscores a moral. Time does not guarantee evasion for those who harm. Even a crime committed long ago, even in an era before modern DNA, before digital records, before national fingerprint systems, may one day be solved. Evidence stored, clues kept intact, diligence repeated, science advancing, these things matter. When Headley was convicted, investigators in Suffolk and Norfolk reopened other unsolved murders and rapes, especially those involving elderly women living alone. Among the names now under renewed scrutiny are Edna Harvey, 1984, Doris Shelley, 1993, Karen Hales, 1993. Whether Headley is involved in any of them is not yet proven. And the investigations continue. The question remains, how many other crimes are hidden in plain sight, linked by behavior, location, opportunity? For forensic teams, for survivors, for families still waiting, Louisa's case offers hope, but also a warning that justice delayed is often justice denied for years, but never entirely out of reach.